So our conversation for tonight is all about holy chutzpah. Okay, this is a Yiddish word that means gumption. It can mean, we're going to talk about what it means, but the actual word of it means moxie, strong, gumption. But it has connotations that can mean full of ego or being rude or disrespectful. Depends on, which Yiddish Bubba, talks to you with this word, okay? So we're going to actually start off our conversation with a little white lie. Okay? Does everyone know what a little white lie is? Okay? It's a lie that we have been sold by society. Okay? Somewhere along the way in Jewish culture, it has become... Shirley, can you do me a favor and shut the door just so the sound will stop? Okay. So somewhere along the way in Jewish culture, there has been a lie that was sold and adopted that many of us absorbed, that becoming more religious means becoming smaller. Okay, smaller with our personality, smaller with ourselves, smaller with our soul. What do I mean by smaller? I mean less bold, less intense, less visible. Okay, now I've had moments myself many of you know my story that I did not grow up religiously observant as a Jew. And as I started learning about Judaism and I started looking at people, I way back in business when I was on the fast track in corporate America, and I was always looking for the people I wanted to emulate. Like if I can fast forward myself 20 years, who are my role models? So I know who to follow. Because I learned pretty early in life, never take advice from someone you don't want to trade places with. So I was always looking ahead to see who could be my coach, my mentor, my model. Now, I will tell you, quite honestly, most of my coaches, my entire life, they never knew my name. Because I was learning from them and studying from them from afar. They may have had a big platform, a big level of influence in business or life or in any capacity. And so I was learning from them zoomed out. So it was one-sided training. They weren't coaching me one-on-one, but I was learning from their lives. So when I started becoming observant as a Jew, and I started asking a lot of questions about Jewish observance and Jewish law and what does it mean to become more connected to the Jewish faith and to Jewish beliefs and to actual Torah truth as opposed to all the nonsense that we all, absorb somewhere along the way. And I was really looking for this model of what it means to be a strong, amazing, empowered, religiously observant Jewish woman. And I was surprised that they were harder to find than what I might have thought. Because they're not spread all over the world as popular as non-Jewish role models. I mean, that's just a statistics situation, right? So I had many moments on my early journey where I wondered, if I fully lean into Torah, will I lose myself? Has anybody ever wondered this question? Like, we feel resistant because there's so many new things, so many things I don't know. We think if I do it, then I'm going to have to become, like a weird holy roller or do things like just detaching from myself. So the bottom line question is, do I have to give up myself in order to really step further and lean further into my Jewish faith? And what I've learned is the opposite. Once I learned the truth, not the nonsense, cut through all the social cultures and propaganda, once I learned the truth, Torah didn't shrink me. It sharpened me. It made me better. It disciplined my strength and it gave me direction. Okay, so here's the point. Holiness does not require smallness. Period. The end. Okay, but even this word holy, it's a very scary word. I mean, who wants to be holy? Like, it just sounds daunting. Like you're set apart by yourself all day, protecting yourself from any outside influences. But the truth of the matter is that we know as a Jewish people, every single Jew is holy. Doesn't matter what you do. Why are you holy? Because you are a part of God. And there's no way that you can be a little bit holy and the rest of you is unholy, because we're infinite creatures. Now, do we, and a conversation even came up about this in the assembly line, can we earn more merits along the way in life? Sure. Do we sometimes make choices because we don't understand what we're doing that cause us to need correction and improvement? Absolutely. But what we have to understand, bottom line, is nothing we could ever do compromises your holiness, because you are a part of God and you do not have to earn God's love. Period. The end. Now, why is that hard for us to absorb? Each of us by nature relate to God how we relate to our parents. We see God as a father figure. So what this means is that if I have any trauma, any daddy issues whatsoever, which every girl does, by the way, in some form or fashion, it creates blockages for us in how we relate to God, how we see God. Okay? So here's where we're starting. This is our foundation for tonight. Okay? Jewish history was not built by small women. Period. Okay?
That again.
Yes. Amen. Okay? So what is holy chutzpah? So if we know that chutzpah means you're kind of like shaking the situation. You're doing something that is unexpected. You're coming with a lot of guts, right? A lot of moxie. Sometimes people think, oh, the chutzpah, like, oh, you're being rude. You're being disrespectful, okay? So that's what has become a connotation of the word chutzpah by itself. But what is holy chutzpah? Holy chutzpah is courage aligned with emet, aligned with truth. Okay, so it means strength without ego. It means refusing to shrink or run from your soul's mission. And tonight we're going to talk about how all of us, when temptation hits, we run into fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and we're like, eject, I need to be safe. Okay? And that's the opposite of holy chutzpah, but it's absolutely 100% human nature. So it doesn't mean that if there's anything wrong with us, that we struggle with these decisions. It just means we have to really start to be clear on what's the root inside me that's causing me to make these decisions. You with me so far? Okay, so we know a little bit now about what holy chutzpah is. What is it not? Okay, holy chutzpah is not loud. It's not rebellious. It's not attention-seeking. And I've given each one of you a handout. Everybody have their handout? Yes. So you have a little definition here of what holy chutzpah is. And you have here now, if you can count them, 20-something women throughout history. This on your page, front and back, is 3,500 years of Jewish women who interrupted destiny. Okay, now some acted publicly, some acted strategically, some acted quietly, but none of them, not a one of them, was small. Okay, now I would love nothing more to have a slumber party and go through all of these and unpack all of them together, because you could fill volumes of books with just the strength of these women. Okay, but you didn't bring your PJs and we all got to get up tomorrow, so we're not going to go through all of them. Okay, however, the reason I went through all the effort to make this handout for you is so you can take it home and keep it as a constant reminder of your own legacy. Okay, so what we're going to do tonight instead, just in the interest of time, we're going to zoom in on a few. I've hand selected a few of my personal favorites that are not so famous, so you can learn a little bit about the hidden heroines of Jewish history. Sound good? Okay, so we're going to start off with two women that lived very different lives. They have one common denominator. Okay, the first one is a woman named Tzipporah. Tzipporah was the wife of Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, so let me take you back. Everybody knows who Moses is, right? Moshe Rabbeinu. We have a lot of people at this table that are new to learning Torah, just like I was new to learning Torah. So do not hesitate to raise your hand and say, I have no idea what you're talking about, okay? And we will make sure to catch you up along the way, okay? So, Tzipporah. Tzipporah is the wife of Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, okay? So I want you to imagine, go back with me in time.
Is her father
Okay?
Huh?
Huh?
Her father is
Yes. Okay. So Moses, she was asking who was the father of Tzipporah. So Tzipporah is the daughter of Yitro, for those of you that know the Jewish history. So this is his daughter, okay? Yitro, the wife of Moses. So I'm going to take you back in history, go back in time, the burning bush. Okay? So Moses just had his burning bush moment. Okay? He's accepted his mission. And he's now on his way with his family. He has two boys. One of them is a newborn, literally as they start out on their trek from a place called Midian to Egypt. So he is on his way to Egypt to redeem the Jewish people. As they're leaving their home, his wife gives birth to their second son. So out of safety, he makes a decision not to do the circumcision until he gets to Egypt. So he has his reasons, but something shocking happens, okay? So the Midrash, which is the oral Torah, tells us that because Moshe delayed in circumcising his son, the angel of death appeared, disguised as a snake. This will blow your mind. Are you ready? Disguised as a snake, and began swallowing Moses from head to toe. Raise your hand if you've never heard this story before. Okay, so this is from the Midrash. The Midrash is the oral Torah that is handed down from our sages from Mount Sinai. It is not listed in the Chumash, the 5 books. Okay? Now, it doesn't make it any less true. It makes it, by the way God ordained Torah is you have the written Torah and the oral Torah. The oral Torah is what explains and fills in all the gaps for the laws we have in the written Torah. Now, I've been learning this very focused for 15 years, and I'm still like, all the time my mind is blown. Okay? Now, again, if I start unpacking every detail, we'll be here till tomorrow. So I'm going to keep going. But if you have questions at the end, scribble them down on your page and say, I need to hear more about this, okay? And I will be more than happy to share with you. So here we have the angel of death, disguised as a snake, huge snake, comes in and starts eating Moses from head to toe, okay? Now, Tzipporah, his wife, understood immediately what was happening. This was not random. This was spiritual consequence because she was a very high-level soul. She could see immediately. She had clarity. And Moses, the future redeemer who was supposed to be teaching us all the rules, neglected a very critical act of the covenant. He started making his own decisions about when to do the circumcision instead of trusting Hashem. Okay? So then what happens? Then his wife kicks into action. She didn't freeze. Okay? She didn't say, well, he's the prophet. I'm just the wife. You know, she didn't say, well, nobody gave me instructions. She took a sharp stone. She circumcised her son herself, and the angel of death disappeared. So she saved Moshe's life. Now, this was not small. Do you agree? This is like, you can't even make this stuff up in a movie. Okay? So she intervened in prophetic leadership. She acted in a moment of what you could call cosmic crisis. Okay? She understood the mission and she stepped into it. Again, what do we take away from this? She did not say, I'm just the supporting role. What can I do? Nobody gave me instructions. Okay? So in our own life today, Tzipporah teaches us that holy chutzpah steps in when clarity demands action. Even when someone else in authority is in the room, there have been many times throughout Jewish history that the person that was meant to be in authority went blank, had a moment of weakness, freaked out for whatever reason. They were suffocated by doubt or things happened. And then the backup team had to launch into action and basically save the world. Okay? So that's Tzipporah. But holy chutzpah doesn't always look like dramatic action. Okay? So next, I'd like to introduce you to a woman named Rachel. Okay? This is not who you think it is. This is not Rachel Imenu. Okay? This is a woman named Rachel, and she is the epitome of what we're going to call long-term diligence. Do you know what this means? Long-term diligence or playing the long game? It means you're not looking for immediate gratification. You understand short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. Okay? So Rachel is, again, not Rachel Imenu. Okay, we're going now, fast-forwarding to the 1st century of the Common Era. So this is right after the destruction of the Second Temple. Okay? Torah has been exiled. The temple has been destroyed. The Jewish people are scattered all over the place. And Rome is absolutely brutal. This is under Roman Empire. Okay? So this is where we meet Rabbi Akiva. Okay, Rabbi Akiva is known as one of the greatest sages of all time. But he didn't start out that way.
He didn't know how to read and write.
Until he was how old?
40.
Rabbi Akiva, considered to be the greatest sage who ever lived, was completely illiterate until he was 40 years old. Did not know how to read or write. So from an illiterate shepherd at 40 years old, he rises to a towering sage. But he didn't rise alone. Rachel, when they first met, she was the daughter of a very wealthy landowner. And she saw something in him that nobody else saw. Not scholarship, not status. She saw potential. She saw the potential in him, his neshama. Okay, so long story short, she marries him against her father's will. Her father disowns her. They live in complete poverty. Our sages say they slept on straw. I mean, we're talking that level of poverty. And what does she do? She sends him away to learn Torah. She says, I'm investing in you. Go away. I'll hold the house down. You go learn Torah. How long is he gone? 12 years. He is away from home, learning. And this is back in the day when you don't have, you don't have video. You don't come back and forth. You don't fly home. She did not see her husband for 12 solid years. He comes back, and before he even enters the house, he overhears her speaking to a neighbor. And the neighbor is mocking her. And the neighbor is making her feel bad, saying, your husband left you for 12 years. Why are you even still here? And Rachel responds and says, if he would listen to me, if it were up to me, he would stay for another 12. Wow. She didn't say it flippantly. She meant it with every fiber of her being, and her husband got the message. So he hears this. He turns around and leaves again. It's crazy. He, without greeting her, without stepping inside, not a big hug, he turned around and left again.
Wow.
For how long?
12 years.
Another 12 years.
And now, for 2 hours,
So-
when you come in synagogue.
Exactly. So 24 years apart. Now, when he finally returns, he does not come back alone. He comes back with a few students. 24,000 students coming in a mob, escorting him home. Can you imagine a mob of 24,000 people walking several hundred miles, escorting him home? Okay?
Is it
So,
written where
no.
he came back from?
Hmm?
Is it written where he came back from?
No. There's a few assumptions, but not specifically written. So the entire city, not only the 24,000 coming with him, but the city where his wife was living, they all come out to greet him. And she comes too. It's a big to-do because now he's become Rabbi Akiva.
Like the tzaddik that is coming.
Yes.
We don't know that.
Yes. Well, they don't know, but she knows. She knows who is coming. Okay? Because she is a very high level neshama, and she said there can only be one person. Okay? So she comes too, but she's still a poor person. She's still dressed very simply, coming like a pauper. So what do all these big Torah giants think as they're coming her way? They're shoving her out of the way. Why are you trying to get to the big, famous, fancy rabbi? She looks like a poor nothing. And some of the students literally try to push her aside. And Rabbi Akiva stops them, and he says, all that is mine and all that is yours is hers. So he publicly tells the whole world, we have nothing without this woman. Okay? But that's not even the end of the story. Okay, right? Yeah. She definitely needs a jeweler, okay? But that is not even the end of their story. So later, during the Omer period, you know what the Omer is? It's the time between Pesach and Shavuos. You count 49 days. There's a long story behind it. We don't have time for it now. But later, years later, during that Omer period, a plague broke out between all of Rabbi Akiva's students for spiritual reasons, not physical reasons. And during that plague, all of the students die. All 24,000 that he worked 24 years without his wife, away from his wife, that they thought was their merit, they all died in that plague. So Torah leadership collapses overnight. The future looks very bleak. Can you imagine 24,000 people around you die?
But holy.
Okay, holy, high level. Okay? So what does Rabbi Akiva do?
Doesn't give up.
He starts again. And he starts with 5 new students. All 5 students become legendary. The first one is, of course, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar. Okay? That's his first of the 5. And then the other 4, their names, if you've ever heard these names, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Elazar. Anytime you ever read Pirkei Avos and you're hearing all these men quoted, those are all students of Rabbi Akiva that he rebuilt after the plague. So we're talking from total devastation to renewal. Now, you've heard of a day called Lag Bomer?
Yeah.
Lag Bomer is the day the plague stopped. And people stopped dying. So it's also the day that later became the yard site, the day of the death of who? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, his top student. So he said, when people die, I only want happiness. That is why Lag Bomer is such a happy day, because the plague stopped, and because Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, I only want you to dance on this day. Okay? So it literally, Lag Bomer became the light that comes after the collapse. Okay? So let's just recap this. Let's make sure we're all on the same page. So Rachel lives alone for 24 years. And then she endured the devastation of the 24,000 students dying, literally her husband's life work that she sacrificed everything for, and then she endures all the rebuilding that comes after that. So her story is not just sacrifice, but it's the enduring strength that she held on to amidst all of the collapse and amidst your whole world looking like it's falling apart. Okay, so both of these women, Tzipporah and Rachel, they gave up living with greatness. You understand they were married to giants. Tzipporah was married to Moshe, and Rachel was married to Rabbi Akiva. Now, many people don't know that immediately after giving of the Torah, Moshe separated from Tzipporah. And she gave the blessing so that he could become the greatness that he was. So what we have to understand is that they did not give up living with greatness because they were weak. In fact, it was just the opposite. They were strong enough to sacrifice without collapsing. They knew the price they were paying, and they paid it willingly. They were not abandoned. They were not neglected. They were not left behind. They were intentional. So what's our lesson from these two women? Holy chutzpah does not rise and fall based on our emotion, not how we feel. Holy chutzpah is disciplined. It believes in something bigger than immediate comfort. Okay? So holy chutzpah plays the long game. Remember, short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. Now, these are legendary women. There are reasons their men became giants, because the neshamas, the souls of these women were so gigantic. Okay? Thank heaven, Hashem is not asking all of us to pay that price. But we can learn a lot from these women, that even when everything around us momentarily looks like it might be collapsing, we have the genetic DNA within us that we can sustain those hardships. You with me? Okay, now we're going to fast forward. I have 4 more women I'm going to introduce you to, and then we're wrapped up. Okay? 4 more. Each story gets better. Okay? I feel like we need popcorn. Okay. So now I'm going to introduce you to a very special trio. Okay? 3 women whose decisive action is no joke better than any soap opera drama you've ever seen. Okay, are you ready? Okay, first, I want to introduce you to Yael. Okay, so we're now Yael. See if you can find her on your page, okay? We're now in the era of the judges. When are the judges? The judges were the people who ruled Israel. They ruled the Jewish people after, first was Moshe, then was Joshua, Yoshua, then came the judges. Okay, so right after Yoshua, Moshe, Yoshua, the judges. Okay, so we're in this era of the judges. Israel is now under Canaanite oppression, one of the enemy territories. They've been under this oppression for 20 years. And they have a nasty general named Sisera who has been terrorizing the Jewish people from all sides. Okay, after a huge battle, he escapes. And this is the story of how it ends. Okay, he runs. Where does he run? When he escapes from the battle, the Israelite men are trying to kill him. He runs away, and he ends up in the tent of a Jewish woman named Yael. Sounds a bit sketchy. How does he end up in this random woman's tent? There was a peace treaty between her husband and his boss, the king. Remember, he was the general of the army, of the Canaanite army. His boss was the king. There was a peace treaty between the king and Yael's husband, so he ran into her tent thinking he was safe. He was hiding there, okay? So what does she do? She says, oh, come in. She invites him in. He asks for water. She gives him milk. What does milk do? Back in the day, actual whole milk straight from a cow, it's heavy. It makes you drowsy. Okay, so the milk put him to sleep, and she tucked him in. She made sure he was good and fully asleep. And then she takes a peg from her tent and a hammer and drives it through his skull. And with that act, I have many, many times imagined if I could do it. First of all, I would be so scared that he's going to wake up, like right at the moment, you know? She does that, and in that moment, she ends the war. Okay? The men fought the battle. They were fighting, and the soldiers were all exhausted, but they couldn't seem to break through. She ended the war because she killed the general. And back in that day, the soldiers, they have no one to follow. Everybody scatters. And that gave Israel enough time to get their act together and then go and kill everybody else, because their people were lost without their leader. So this was not rage. This was not rebellion. This was an act of national heroism. Now, did she wait to ask permission to save the Jewish people? No. So what do we learn from this in our own life? Holy chutzpah is not afraid to act under threat. We don't cower in the corner and wait for somebody else to come along and be our savior. We don't freeze, we don't fawn, we don't run away and hide. Okay, so that's Yael. Now there's a trio, you got two more. Okay, next after Yael is Yehudit. Okay, who is Yehudit? Now I want you to fast forward. Remember, we were just after Moshe in the desert, okay, in Canaan. Now we're fast forwarding 1,000 years to the Hanukkah story. Okay, Greek oppression. Now, the Greeks are not just fighting us politically. They are trying to erase Jewish identity, right? They say you can keep your customs, but don't have Brit. All the things that make us Jewish are the things that they weren't willing to do. So the whole place is under siege. The men are panicking. They're about to surrender. And this woman named Yehudit steps forward. Now, here's what you have to know about her. There is nothing said about her before or after this act. She has no pedigree, no lineage. We know nothing about her except for that she is an unknown woman that steps up and becomes the hero. Okay? So she sees what's happening. She sees the siege. She sees that everything is falling apart. So what does she do? She watches what's happening in the war camp around her. So she makes a decision to go in. She intentionally dresses very strategically. Okay? Now she dresses attractive, but not seductive. Okay? She doesn't want to raise suspicion. She doesn't want everybody staring at her, but she wants to command presence with where she's going. Okay? So she enters the enemy camp, and she tells the enemy general that she has information that he wants to know. So she brings with her two things. She brings a basket. They check the basket, make sure there's no problem. What's inside her basket? The first thing is salty food. So she says, please, I want to help you. While I'm telling you this information, I know you've been in battle all day. Let me help you. So she gives him a lot of salty food while she's telling him the information. What does salty food make in a person? Makes you thirsty. What's the second thing in her basket? Wine. A lot of wine. What does wine also do? Makes you sleepy. Okay? So she gives him a lot of wine. I'm guessing her story was very long. Okay, so she gives him a lot of wine. He passes out. Then she takes his sword, because she only had two things, the food and the wine. She takes his sword and cuts off his head while he's passed out in his own tent. Okay? So she did not defeat this army with strength. She was one gal. She defeated the army with strategy. Okay? Now again, she didn't wait to be chosen. She chose herself. So how do we apply this in our own lives? Holy chutzpah uses strategy when we don't have physical strength. And sometimes strategy is even stronger than physical strength, right? So that is the wisdom that we can all apply. Now, if you want to talk about a true hidden heroine, let me take you back a few decades just prior to this, right before the Hanukkah story started. Okay? Right before the revolt began, the Greeks imposed a decree. The decree was that every Jewish bride was to be violated by a Greek officer right before her wedding. So on the night before she got married, she had to be with a Greek officer, and only then would they allow her to marry her Jewish husband. So now I want to introduce you to the daughter of a man named Matisyahu. Are you familiar with the man named Matisyahu? The Maccabees. The whole story of Hanukkah and the leader, the high priest, Matisyahu. This is his daughter. Okay? Now, interestingly enough, we don't even know her name. They kept her so modest, and you're going to hear why. They protected her so much after the sacrifice she gave that they call her the daughter of Matisyahu. Okay? So at her own wedding feast, when she was to be married the next day, she stood up in the room full of all the biggest Torah sages of the time. She ripped off her gown and she stood there publicly in the middle of the room naked. A frum, tznius, modest, Jewish, observant woman standing in the front of all of these men naked. Now, what do the men do? The men are horrified. They're embarrassed. They're outraged. And she delivers the mic drop line. What does she say? She says, "You are ashamed of me, but you're not ashamed of what they are doing to your daughters? You're not ashamed of yourselves for allowing it to happen?" And with that statement, that moment ignites the entire Maccabee revolt.
Wow.
So the revolt didn't begin with a sword. It began with a woman who refused to stay silent, who refused to live under this oppression. So how do we apply this today? Holy chutzpah has the power to awaken an entire sleeping generation. And, this honestly, a sleeping generation could describe exactly what we're living in today, if you think about it. Okay? So in this trio, Yael, Yehudit, and the daughter of Matisyahu, you have 3 different eras, 3 different patterns, 3 different methods, but one specific pattern emerges. And the pattern is this: they did not confuse modesty with passivity. They were all very modest women, but they said, we're going to do what the moment requires. And they sacrificed their own modesty and their own dignity to save an entire nation. So holiness, life, was not fragile and delicate in their hands. Okay, and that is strength without smallness. So now the last 2 women that I'm going to introduce you to, you know them, but you might not know the details that I'm going to share with you right now, okay? So we've seen women that their movements changed an entire nation. So now I want to share with you in these last 2 women a different type of courage, okay? The first one is Ruth. Okay, Ruth is a Moabite princess. She's a princess, an actual princess from another nation. She's royal, she's secure, she's protected. But she converts and marries a Jew. And then what happens? Her husband dies. Almost immediately after she gets married, her husband dies. Her mother-in-law tells her, go back, build a new life, remarry, be safe. And what does Ruth say? Nope, your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. So she gets no applause, no guarantee, no safety net. She chooses a covenant with God over comfort. She could have run back to daddy, and she didn't. You see, smallness clings to security. How can I make sure to stay safe? But royalty chooses destiny. So what does it mean to cling to smallness? It means living beneath your calling or shrinking yourself to survive. Have you ever looked around and asked, like, am I too much? You know, like, what if I rock the boat? What if I lose what keeps me safe, okay? So Ruth lost all three. She lost her security, her future, her protection. And what came from Ruth? Should I say who came from Ruth?
David HaMelech.
King David. So how do we apply all of this in our lives today? We have to ask ourselves a question. Where are we clinging to safety and comfort instead of stepping into our calling? And last but not least, sometimes royalty doesn't look like bold action at all. Now, I want to remind you, who in this room is royalty? All of us. Why? We're daughters of the King. Exactly. Sometimes royalty looks like contained power. What does contained power mean? It means I have self-restraint. Dignity with restraint. Anybody have a clue who I'm going to introduce you to as our final hidden heroine? Chaya Mushka. Ding, ding, ding. Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka is the wife of our Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe.
I thought it was you.
Yeah. And now we're going to talk about me. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Host Michelle. Glad we got that cleared up. Okay. Woo. Okay. She's my namesake.
I'm like, okay, 20th century, okay.
That is hilarious. Oh my gosh. Woo! Now I'm embarrassed. I'm red. Okay. So, Chaya Mushka Schneerson is the wife of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. She was never loud. But do not mistake that for being small. Okay, even as a teenager, she was chosen by her father, who was the previous Rebbe, to be the executor of his will and his entire estate. So I just want you to understand this. In a world of towering Hasidim, Rabbanim, Ashkenazim, lawyers, judges, accountants, everybody swimming around this man, begging to be his assistants and helpers, what does he do? He appoints his daughter as the head of all of his affairs and his estate and his future as a teenager. Okay? Now, what happens shortly after that, after she's been doing this for a few years? When her father was forced into exile by the Soviets, he chose one person to accompany him into exile. Who did he choose? His daughter. By the way, she wasn't his oldest daughter. She was the middle daughter. He had chose his middle daughter. He had 3 children, only 3 girls. Middle daughter, the youngest one, by the way, was killed in a concentration camp. But his middle daughter is who he chose to escort him into literal Siberia. Actual Siberia exile. Okay? So picture that she's surrounded by men. He's in prison. He's not there to protect her. She escorts him into exile. And then she's left to fend for herself in a time of danger, upheaval, just trying to survive in the freezing cold of Siberia. And what does she do? She stands beside him. Strong, quiet. It doesn't mean she's fearless, but it means she doesn't let her fear stop her. And that really is the definition of courage, is we move forward in spite of our fear. Now, when they came to the U.S., her father came first, and she and her husband came a few years later. They escaped from the Holocaust. And when they came to the U.S., she worked alongside her husband doing 2 things. One of them is known. She was helping her father in his shlichut. The other thing that a lot of people don't know is that her and her husband, who was the future Rebbe, actually both worked in a U.S. shipyard in New York to support the Allies in World War II. So they both did that together. And she did many, many things. She was very busy in supporting roles of her father's presidency. Yet after her father's passing, when her husband became president of the Jewish people, that called the Nasi, she quietly disappears from the stage. We hardly ever see her again. After that time that her father became president, there are no more pictures of her, 0, that exist in the public. Why did she disappear? Not because she lacked power, not because her husband forced her to, not because it was custom, not because she lacked presence. Now, part of her restraint was that she was a very humble person and she didn't want the spotlight. You know, people were literally knocking on their door and calling all the time and doing whatever they could to serve the wife of the president. But she didn't want to be famous and she didn't want to take any attention away for personal gain. That was one reason. But there's another reason that most people don't know. Part of her secrecy and quietness and modesty was to preserve the dignity of her family members. So what do I mean by this? Even in the family of the Nasi, the president, there was family drama. There was tension. What was the tension over? I'm not going to go into details, but there was disagreement over who was meant to be the next Rebbe. And she chose privacy and respect over drama. Now that is not weakness, because she had every right to assert herself. That is strength. She didn't shrink. She didn't perform. She didn't advertise herself. She simply knew who she was. So what we learn from this, what we learn from Chaya Mushka, is that tznius, modesty, is not erasing yourself. It's also not begging for attention. It's not competing. It's simply living with such inner clarity that you don't need applause. So in a world that rewards exposure, she embodied presence. And think about it, in today's world, okay, we equate algorithm with influence, right? If the algorithm feeds you and everything shows up on your page, that's what makes you an influencer. This is a woman that exuded influence without needing to be on display for the world to see. Okay? So holy chutzpah is not always loud. Sometimes it's dignified power that does not need to prove itself. Okay? So let's wrap up. We started tonight with a lie. Who can remember what the lie is?
Becoming religious means you have to give up something.
Yes. That holiness or becoming connected to your faith, to your roots, requires smallness. Okay? So let's end tonight with Esther. It is Purim, so we'll wrap up with our queen. Okay? Esther did not begin as a queen. Everyone knows her story, right? We're not going to go into her story tonight. But she did not begin as a queen. She began as someone in hiding. She didn't want to go to the castle at all. In fact, her uncle, Mordecai, told her to conceal her identity. Don't let anybody know who she is. So she followed her uncle's instructions and she survived. But then the moment came. And Mordecai tells her, the most famous thing Mordecai ever said to Esther was what? Who knows if you were chosen for such a time as this? What does that mean? Who knows if for this very moment you were born? If this very moment is why you became queen? That was her turning point. Not when she was given the crown as a beauty contest, but when she stopped hiding from her environment. So what does she do? She fasts for 3 days, not even any water. We would all be like on the side of the road. Okay, for 3 days she fasts. Then she gathers all the women to pray. And the climax of the scene is she walks into the king's private chamber uninvited, where appearing without an invitation could mean instant death. And because she worked so hard to prepare herself and prepare the community, and she had the favor, the blessing of God, she went in calm, not loud, not frantic, not chaotic, but composed. clear, strategic. She did not become regal by shrinking. She became regal by, everybody sit up straight, by standing tall with dignity. Okay? So remember, holy chutzpah is not about being louder. It's about refusing to shrink. So what we're going to take home from this is that holy chutzpah, what does it mean for us? It means speaking when it's uncomfortable. It means standing when it's unpopular. It means waiting quietly when ego wants to say the last word or rush in. Holy chutzpah is acting without drama. It's refusing to play small, to make anybody else feel comfortable. Anybody ever had to do that or felt like we had to do that? I'm going to make myself smaller so you feel better about yourself. And we should also say holy chutzpah is doing what needs to be done without needing to capture it on Instagram. Okay? So we live in a world that rewards exposure. Yes? Our world rewards outrage. Like the more public the outrage is, the better, right? We reward ego. The more skin you show and the louder you yell, the better, right? The better ratings we get. But loud is not necessarily strong, and small is not necessarily holy. Royalty chooses when to move. So I want to make sure you understand, before we leave this room and walk into Purim season, never confuse dignified modesty with smallness. Okay? Jewish women were never small, and neither is anyone in this room. So I invite you all to take your handout home as a constant reminder of your legacy and of your birthright. You have immense inner strength as a part of your DNA. Whether you were born a Jew or converted, your DNA was magically, physically transformed, and you have just as much genetic DNA at that point as every born Jew. And as Mordechai said to Queen Esther, who knows if you were born for such a time as this? So this very moment is our calling. So I'd like to say l'chaim. May we all embrace our inner royalty this month as the energy of Queen Esther. Do y'all know that the energy of Queen Esther literally radiates through the entire world for the whole month of Purim? So we're going to internalize our Queen Esther energy. We're going to channel our royalty, and we are going home from here as the queens that we are to change our own world. L'chaim, l'chaim. I love you. Happy Purim. Zeo.